What Drives You is brought to you by Ziglar, your premier source for equipping life and leadership coaches. Visit Ziglar.com and let them inspire your true coaching performance.
Yeah.
Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller, your host and guide to help you master your inner drive so you can live a driven, inspired, and peaceful life that sees you driving further and enjoying the ride. In this episode, I bring you a special What Drives You episode with renowned author of The Millennial Whisperer, Tuff. Chris was one of the first advertisers to work directly with Mark Zuckerberg in 2006 and filmed one of the first ever viral videos, which landed him on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Tuff's natural ability to connect with his nearly 80% millennial and Gen Z workforce led him to publish the national best-selling The Millennial Whisperer in 2019. It's kind of a global movement that soon followed that, as the Atlanta resident Chris shared lessons on empathy and genuine connection at work on some of the largest stages in the world, including such Fortune 100 companies like Nike. I, of course, wanted to dig into Chris's personal drives, and you'll be interested to hear that his initial drive was simply to beat his older brothers in anything and everything. And while that may not sound dramatic, the thread you'll keep hearing in all of these shows is how often these seemingly innocuous events in our youth direct the trajectory of our lives, and we don't even realize it. Well, Chris went on, found himself just 7 years ago, burned out. He had a wife, 2 kids, great success in work, and totally spent. He took a month-long sabbatical and really just reinvented his life. So in this episode, you'll hear how his story unfolded. And through it, I believe you'll find aspects that reveal similar issues in your life, opportunities, if you will, that you can reinvent yourself. You can find Chris Tuff at themillennialwhisperer.com. So I asked you about some of your early motives, and you said beating my brothers in the game of life. What's with that?
So people would ask me at a young age. I was the youngest of 6 kids and an identical twin. So,
wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So from a biological, or I guess from the nature and nurture side, but mostly nurture side, if anyone's done any work in family systems theory, it basically structured me to be the most competitive individual to ever be born, because I was always struggling for relevancy in my own identity, and also from a long line of overachievers. And so as I went into the business world and finally found my zone of where kind of my passion, purpose, and profession all overlapped for the first time ever, which was in the digital and social kind of advent of digital and social media. If anyone was to ask me, so Chris, like, what motivates you? I'd say deep down, it's beating my older 2 brothers at the game of life. They're all super successful and I'm going to beat them. And then I hit rock bottom about 4 years ago. And it was at that rock bottom that I decided to change that metric.
So literally, as a kid, as a youth, going through school, whatever, so you're super competitive, but you look back as your drive was to, competition, we can look at that. Oh, it's a good hearted, competition. Brothers are going to be brothers, whatever. Or do you look at it now and go, man, there was some significant insecurity, or you're really trying to prove yourself? How do you weigh the health of it?
I think it was all those things, right? So it's what am I going to be known for out there? How am I going to make a name for myself when, my brothers and sisters have all gone on to Ivy League schools and become, quote unquote, successful in whatever field they've gone after. And so for me, I think it was insecurity. When you're coupled together with another being, just trying to be an individual as an identical twin is tough. So if my brother chose soccer, I chose lacrosse, right? Because I'm like, I'm not going to try to do the same thing he did. He chose to go to school up in the Northeast. I chose to stay in the South to Vanderbilt. And so I feel like with a lot of those choices that I made, whether it be large decisions or even small ones, a lot of it was kind of through this framework of what's going to set me up to be both different and recognized. Yeah. And, as a young 6 kids in a very hectic household, it was, you're always kind of vying for attention. And so,
so sports and academia, both socially, I mean, were those three areas, were those all areas where you're trying to prove yourself?
100%. And everything, and I would be relentless at any of them, at all of them, really.
I mean, you mentioned nature versus nurture, and you got 2 kids, right?
Yeah, 2 daughters, 11 and almost 9.
Well, and I've got a bunch of kids, and it's daunting to me to realize the impact and influence on their lives of their upbringing. So to the best of my abilities, I'm going to have this influence, but then their brothers and sisters are going to have this influence. How is that? I mean, do you look at that? Like when we look at personality profiles, sometimes I wonder, do I know what my authentic, unadulterated personality is like outside of my upbringing? I mean, it's impossible. Who would Chris be if you'd been single, an only kid?
And I don't know, and I don't think I do think the harder you work at yourself in this journey, right? And the more genuine you can be to whatever it is that is driving here and here, and that being always evolving. And that takes massive tenacity and resilience to do it, right?
I call it re-brainwashing. We were brainwashed. We can't not be brainwashed as kids. So to come out of that, I mean, it's a big deal. Yeah,
totally. And so I think that, and it's not, I'm also married to an identical twin. All right. So
that's
take this,
odd. Okay.
Right? So here's what's crazy is we both have foils, my wife and I. And what has been the greatest realization from a social experiment is looking at how much, whether we care to look at it or not, our choice of spouse ends up molding you as an individual.
Yeah.
And because, we both went out into the world 14 years ago with identical twins. Neither one of us had gotten married. We all got married to different people. Our twins didn't marry each other. Right. So that would have been even crazier, right?
Yeah.
But now we get to see the impact of that spouse choice on personality, interests, geographic locations, and all of those things. So, I think even outside of just the family upbringing piece, there's also other contributing factors that make us what it is that we are, and what, especially what motivates us.
I mean, when you right now, so as a father, man, do you look back on that and go, man, I was so shaped by my siblings, by that family group? Has it caused you to look at your parenting and be, uber sensitive to it, to how?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, and I think so much of that pressure, right? I mean, I even look at the pressure. I put myself under ridiculous amounts of pressure as a competitive individual, as an achiever. All of that comes from me. It's not coming from anyone else, right? And that is a self-inflicted thing. And what I'm trying to create with my kids is at least, the 2 greatest characteristics that I think make or break people and their ability to relentlessly pursue their passions is tenacity and really, I mean, it's that tenacity, perseverance, as well as that resilience. Yeah. And so, be allowing our kids to fail, allowing also ourselves to fail as we consistently evolve. And I think so many people feel like there's just one track, but we have seasons of life that we need to nurture to continue that development. And we're never quite there. And that's for me, progress in that direction and living a life where passion, purpose, and profession can all overlap to where you don't even know when you're working. That's the most beautiful thing that God gave us. And it's just that so many of our paradigms and the way that we've been set up don't allow those things to thrive. And that's part of what I'm trying to catalyze with a lot of the stuff that I do around connection.
Well, and I want to get into that. You just looking at the trajectory. So you do go through school, you're competitive, whatever, you end up going to, you mentioned staying in the South. You went to Vanderbilt.
Yep.
Are you in Nashville now?
No, I'm in Atlanta. I stayed south.
That's right, Atlanta. I saw that in the book. Yeah. So you go to Vandy, and did you graduate there?
Graduated Vanderbilt with a huge ego, all the confidence in the world. Went to Boston and had 64 failed job interviews until I got my first job.
What was your degree?
It was human and organizational development, essentially applied human psychology to businesses.
And so why go that direction?
Well, so I interviewed for every single job in those 64, everything from investment banking.
Well, but I mean in college at Vandy, why go after that degree?
Oh, because to me, I was obsessed with people. I was obsessed with what drove people to be the way they were. And then to watch that in the application of theory was so compelling to me. Especially I remember our small, actually, I was like the biggest geek in the HOD classes because it got me so excited to understand how human psychology worked, but then also applying that to group dynamics in businesses in a very applicable way. You'd actually go through a lot of these things that you were learning. So in our small group classes, we learned how small groups came together by putting onto a challenge as a group. So we'd actually go through those stages and be like, oh, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. Oh, this is so crazy. And I've always been just kind of obsessed with people and what drives them. And it's just like this innate curiosity / enthusiasm that I have around connections.
Literally innate though? I mean, because I was going to ask, is there
literally innate?
So you don't look back and go, oh yeah, I was exposed to XYZ. My parents did this. I think moving around a lot allowed me to connect with a lot of different people. But genuinely speaking, I mean, one of my greatest strengths is like what you see is what you get. I'm the same person in I talk the same way to you as I do a billionaire or some, famous actor or actress. I mean, that authenticity comes from a place of wearing my heart in my sleeve and somehow being brought up in a very British household where that's the opposite, right? I actually went to London, Kevin, my junior year to figure out why my parents were because my dad's British, my mom's half British. I'm like, why is my family this way? Wow. And after going to school there for a semester, I quickly realized why they were. And I was like, okay, I was born kind of this freak of nature with my heart on my sleeve ever since I came out, and just with this kind of compassion and obsession with connection with others. Well, so you're pursuing that in a degree, you get out, you've got the fancy Vanderbilt diploma to hold up. Yeah. And what did you say, 64?
64.
Why?
I think ultimately it came down to one, it was 2003. So it was everything was kind of still springing back from, what happened in 2000 with the implosion of .com. But I think ultimately what it came down to was I was checking boxes, right? I was like, investment bankers make a lot of money and that's quote unquote successful. So I'll try that. But I think what they saw in all of my interviews was like, this guy's not that passionate about it. And it wasn't until my 65th job interview that I got my first job offer. And that was with a small digital marketing firm. There were 12 employees there. And it was a little bit creative. It was, all around this new world of digital. And I was like, wait, you can actually make some money by being creative. And I had no idea this existed. And, sure enough, once I landed there, it took 5 lateral moves over a 5-year period of time, making $28,000 until I really fell into my niche in the social media world, which was where I say when your passion, purpose, and profession do overlap, ridiculous things tend to happen to you. And so I had one of the first viral videos, for example, Kevin, with me getting engaged to my wife before YouTube. 7 million people saw me get engaged to my wife. We were on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and Good Morning America flew down to interview us about this very emotional proposal that I put on ChristopherTuff.com. And I did all of that with the purpose of, well, one, our twins seeing our engagement, but 2, checking a box from the owner of our firm saying, where she challenged me if I got 1 million views of a viral video, we then use that to prove to our clients that we can do this new social digital media thing. This is in 2005, 2006, right before all that stuff started to happen. And they ended up giving me my own trend spotting social media department before it was really kind of invented.
So you said, leading up to your change, let's say your valley, whatever, but leading up to that, you said something about, the aspect of learning not to make money the North Star. But even back then, so you're in this arena that is in your interest. I mean, it's valid for that and your passion, purpose, whatnot.
Was that really it though? Was it really money as opposed to just, again, this is the further achievement, affirmation, whatever?
I think it was first the affirmation and the accolades I got along the way, that fueled that passion. And, it also, I was obsessed with where everything was going and kind of the emerging digital media. I mean, I worked directly with Mark Zuckerberg and sat across from him before they launched to the public as one of his first advertisers. And people will be like, oh, what was that like? I was like, well, he didn't really talk all of dinner, but I was one of the first ones to work with him. Yeah. And being at the advent of such a massive explosion with where the world ended up going, it was a ride. And I was holding on to this rocket ship with everything I had while looking around and saying, am I beating them now? Am I beating my brothers now? Is this it? I'm making more money than I ever thought you could make in advertising. I became the youngest partner of our 100-year-old history of our firm. But deep down, after about 9 or 10 years of that ride, I found myself exhausted and unfulfilled. And I think most of that stems from really doing a lot of this stuff or coming to the realization that, is this really what I want? Is success, is the metric of success of beating my brothers at the game of life the best metric? And it was like, no, it's not.
So was it literally a short amount? Was it an occurrence of the breakdown? I mean, are you going along, and is it a crash, or is it kind of a slow, what?
It was a crash.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, and it manifested as almost panic attacks and massive amounts of stress and not sleeping much. And ultimately it came down to me looking at my wife, and I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. And she's like, yeah, I can tell. Like, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I think I'm going to take a month off. I'm going to ask for kind of a sabbatical.
And so you're married. You already have the 2 kids.
2 kids.
You got the job, youngest partner. You're working like mad. You do care about what you're doing. So you enjoy that. You're leading people, having success, but you're just, in reading it sounds like you're just full tilt boogie. I mean, you're burning the candle at all ends and just nuts. And she saw it. You said other people at work, your partners, whatever, they saw it and said, you kind of related, they were kind of like waiting for you to, when's this going to end or when's it going to come around? And so it wasn't a big surprise. And so it was a screeching stop, and you took a month sabbatical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that month was just kind of a wake up the next morning and try to open your eyes and figure out what's going on. Was there any kind of a purposeness to that month?
Sure. I tore the house down, and I looked very in depth within myself. I turned off my phone for a month. I didn't talk to, found a place that I could actually spend time with just me and really assess what it is that I want to be building, doing, and also where it is that I want to go. And it was in that month off that I realized that, well, one, my metric of success was off. Beating my brothers at the game of life probably isn't the best thing. And instead, success should be really deemed on a nightly or a daily basis when at night my head hits the pillow. And it should just simply be, did I have the impact that I intended for the day? I had already figured out what my personal purpose statement was, but I further honed it. And that was to inspire and connect. And so I went from this place of being the tip of the spear, the tip of the arrow for the firm. And, if you had Googled me back then, you would have seen all of the accolades that I got for, my ideas around where social media was going, et cetera. And I really took all of those efforts and said, you know what, I'm going to focus it on my people. And everyone on my team, we have 320 employees at that time at the firm. And I'm just going to be that leader that they need. And I'm going to put it all in them, and I'm going to let them shine. I'm going to let them have the headlines and really take all of that effort in creating that connection inward. And what happened through that process was magical. And I found it to be 10 times more fulfilling than anything else I'd ever done. And I found I had a knack for really getting people really, once again, inspiring and connecting people. And, it was after about a year of that, Kevin, that I was at a executive retreat, still kind of pursuing this stuff, that I introduced myself around the fire. And I was like, well, I don't know how to introduce myself because I'm not really the digital and social guy anymore at the firm. Well, I'm kind of like the Millennial Whisperer. And I introduced myself as the Millennial Whisperer. And that was, I shared my story, sat down around the fire. And the guy leading the retreat, who I didn't know at the time, Tommy Breedlove, kicks me. And he goes, you better write that book. And I was like, what book? He goes, The Millennial Whisperer. You will crush it. And some of the guys around the fire, they're like, yeah. And, average age being 45 to 50, they're like, well, what do you do? What are some of the things? Because I can't stand this generation, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I gave him a few of the tactics that I use with my different team members, the art of the flyby. I'm like, well, every Monday I go by everyone's desk and I ask them how their weekend was. And I usually know because I follow them on Instagram and I say, oh, Meg, that puppy you just adopted is so cute. Like, tell me more about that. And they're like, the art of the flyby, that stuff works. And I talked about a few other things. And it was 3 weeks later, three of them called me and they're like, Chris, I'm implementing some of your strategies and they work. And so I ended up calling this Tommy Breedlove guy again. And I was like, Tommy, I think I'm going to write this book. So he was like, all right, here's what you need to know. And the rest was kind of history from there.
I want to ask some details on that. And just so you know,
Sure.
Kind of like you, Tommy is a guy that I have known of for a long time. And whenever this show publishes, he'll be on within, I think, 30, 45 days.
I love it.
So we'll talk about you then.
I love it. I love it.
Okay. So I want to come back though. So you have this month away, this, rebirthing in essence, death and rebirth maybe, and
Sure.
a different focal point. What was the timeline between that point, that month away, and this executive retreat?
Probably about 6 months.
Oh,
And-
okay.
And yeah, so that time away, there are a couple key decisions that I'm not shy to share. One was changing that metric of success.
Yeah.
2 was doubling down on my family and my daughters and being a little bit more a part of their life versus, on my cell phone and distracted all the time.
Yeah.
And on work trips. I was traveling at least once a week on different planes going who knows where. And then the third piece was as I looked at kind of the stock of the soup, I was like, all right, I need to stop just drinking, because what drinking does for me was, kind of added this element of anxiety that I didn't really need. So I took that out as well. And what I found once I started acting upon these things, I was like, wait, this is amazing. Like this is as true to who I was meant to be as I've ever felt. Authenticity and living that. And then I found that as I started to work with the different people on my team, I got to see that impact so profoundly. And I was like, this is it. This is why I was put on this earth. And then, it was about, once again, 5 months after getting a little bit more of that going, that I was like, okay, I got the confidence to do this thing.
And that executive retreat. So here you are. You're still with 22
Yep.
Squared. You're with them. You go to this retreat. Is this just a solo thing that have anything to do with work, or it's just you on your own?
Just solo, just kind of in this pursuit of becoming a better human.
You say executive retreat. Was it when you say that, it's to me, I hear that. And that could be 15 different flavors of an executive retreat. I assume, and in knowing of Tommy somewhat, that it was something not focused on, hey, here's how to get to the next level and make your next $1 million. This was a personal.
Yeah, very much slanted on the personal side. The only reason you can call it an executive retreat is that it was comprised of executives.
Okay,
that's it.
And so was that? Had you all along still had this focus on your, personal development, personal growth, or was that kind of a dawning of it in a more I'm going to use that word healthy again, but in a more healthy way?
I would say that it was a dawning of it by opening up to others about what I was doing solo. Okay. And I was doing a lot of the work and practicing some of these things on my own without necessarily opening up to others about what this is all about. And that was huge for me. And I was talking to my wife about it with Tommy the other day, because now Tommy and I are best friends. And, he's also the first person I call when I needed practical advice. And my wife talked about right before that retreat, I turned to her one night and I had tears in my eyes. And I said, Julie, how sad is it that I don't really have any friends anymore? As I've been kind of going on this journey alone, I don't really, because I'm not going out to parties and hanging out with the same set of friends, and I'm just kind of lonely. And she just didn't know what to say. And then enter Tommy. And that was really the catalyst to connection with other people around this, what then pretty much became kind of an obsession for me of, how do we just continue to live more authentic lives ourselves? Specifically,
well, I'm curious on that, because you said in some of the content that you gave me, you said, and you've said it multiple times here, I'm obsessed with genuine connection. So that was early on. That was the thread all through all this stuff. So it's interesting because that was a true thread. So that was a true thread. Maybe you were walking it out in a, not as deep of a way as you are now, because you also said deep down, as humans, we all just want to be loved, recognized and accepted. So here you are with this obsession for genuine connection. You go through this personal crisis and revamping, and you still have that thread. I like that it's still, that was still true to you. But if I'm understanding right, is it even fair to say it took a different direction, or just took a deeper dive?
I think it took a deeper dive in a different direction, because it was less of having impact me to others, and it was more of having impact through others. And, even when trying to create my purpose statement to put that stake in the ground, I went all the way back to like my third grade report cards. And I remember vividly some of the only positive things on those were Chris's enthusiasm is contagious. That was in third grade, Kevin, and I still remember it. And that is the foundation of essentially what I've become and continue to develop on top of. And so, I call it like those 64 job interviews, right? I kind of call it this Plinko game of life that kind of spit me out somewhere close to where my passions were.
Yeah.
And then, with 5 lateral moves at the time, I was super passionate and excited about it, but we evolve as human beings. And I think oftentimes we get stuck in our old jobs that were catered to younger selves versus making some of those moves that are necessary to continue that development. And really that executive retreat for me was, once again, 5 months into a newer role that I was changing that mindset to having impact through others versus, more of just me being that point of the arrow.
Well, so it's interesting you talking about your perspective change with, and my paraphrasing, you being the hero and you helping other people be the hero. It harkens to, this is Donald Miller's, storyline. Yeah. And what he nails us to the wall now with, looking at our website and go, yeah, it's all about you. It's not about, who's the hero. It's your customer. So, so as you're doing that, you're walking this new metric in essence, and you go to the executive conference. Tommy hits you and other people with support for this Millennial Whisperer. So you write this book, which at face value, and I'm holding it up here for those watching the video, at face value, you could say, okay, the guy's got great insight.
And here's the Spanish one, by the way.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That is funny. It's funny. I told you, I just signed a book deal, and we kept the international rights. And the first person to buy the international rights is a Korean publisher.
I love it. That's going to look so cool.
I'm wondering, but I'm also wondering why that happened.
That's awesome.
But here's a guy with some insight on millennials that can help us who want to have influence or who are leading millennials? We can give them insight, but it feels like it was very much just a coming of age for you.
Oh yeah. It was, yeah, there's no better way to put it.
So is it one of those things where here you did, okay, I'm going to hold the book up again. You did a work. So you poured yourself into this to be of value to people, but within it, can we say that you found your voice?
Yeah, I found my voice, and I found my books are interesting, right? And I've learned a lot about books. I'm always astounded at how few people read books, even when you give 10,000 of them away, which I think it was your dad that challenged me to give as many away as possible. I was like, all right. And I gave away 10,000 Millennial Whisperer books. But, it's what has been so fascinating to me, though, is that the impact of a book is profound and for a lot of different ways. And it allows you to truly be a creator and an innovator, and to have something that is both tangible and ingestible, and things that it can create these waves and ripples that are delayed. And for someone that loves instantaneous gratification, like a book was like, what? It's going to take 3 years for this to actually really get some of the momentum going. But it's like, wow, no matter what way you look at it, it's true.
Yeah.
And so what books allow you to do is to really double down on, I think, innovative thinking that you yourself can come up with, but then also to then create business opportunities and even speeches and interviews that are right in line with where your greatest passions lie. Like, how cool is that? And so for me to be able to taste that, and listen, it took, I took out a huge loan. I had 700, I think over 700 podcasts and media interviews, and, but I went all in, and that is what it takes, I think, to really get the word out there. And then it starts, you go from this mentality of making it happen to letting it happen.
Okay. Well,
and I'd say,
I wanted to dig in there. So you're still, this, again, go back to the executive conference and this prompt to, hey, you need to write this book. You're still, even though you changed some things to a more sustainable life, still full-time partner in this firm.
Yeah.
When did you start to veer from that and say, I want to go all in this? I don't even know, other direction, or just in your own direction, at least.
Yeah.
How long?
I would say, well, it was, you probably know my friend Nick Pavlidis, who is kind of my go-to for the editing and a lot of the context around the book. And I remember right before publishing, not right before, it was probably 3 months prior to publishing, he said, so Chris, how big do you want this thing to be? And I was like, whatever the biggest is. And he was like, all right, just buckle up. And it was really in that moment where it's like, all right, I'm committing to this, and I will not stop until I have the impact that I intended, and all of that. And I had a couple visions in my head. One, I wanted to use the book to land a new client for my firm, to show a different way of having impact and being able to get through the doors. But, two, I had this vision of being on the main stage at Nike, has always been my dream. And I did that, right? With the Millennial Whisperer, I was on the main stage at Nike I think I actually did cry at the end of it, because I was like, this is kind of my dream ever since I started this journey. And it took me about 18 months to get there. And, that for me is beautiful, right? Like, how cool is that you can create this life and this world that is so in line with your head and heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So you become known for this. I heard stories from my dad somewhat on some of the stages you've been on and the books and whatnot. When did that become then? Did you just, was there a day you officially left 22 Squared?
No, I'm still at 22 Squared today.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And the whole premise is that I use the book to open up doors for new business and relationships. And every day, I would say, a new one opens up.
Wow.
And, it's in different realms of organizations, but my specialty is curating genuine relationships and connection with whoever it is. And a lot of that's kind of taken me to what the next book is about. But, for me, we've got to get a little bit more creative about how we navigate the business world with being a painkiller. I say, and one of the filters I use for the Millennial Whisperers, be a painkiller, not a vitamin. And we know with books, there's so many vitamins out there. And instead, I needed to address and alleviate specific pain points that organizations were going through. And there's probably no greater one than millennials and Gen Z right now. And, once again, the whole premise of my book is around really using them as a catalyst to change the way that we look at our organizations, and we use them to evolve to what we need to be evolving for. Because deep down, if you look at what millennials and Gen Zers want, we all kind of want it.
Well, and just kind of off tangent a little bit, but with
Sure.
the book, because I know I came into it viewing it as, if I'm heading up Nike and I've got all these, kids working for me, I'm going to read this to understand how to be a better influencer leader with them. Is it something, however, that you are also recommending that the millennials themselves read? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And, once again, this is a book about meeting somewhere in the middle about stuff. I talk a lot about the impact of social media and instantaneous gratification, and what I call is, the kind of grass is always greener complex, or what leads into what social media has done is it's created, and not just millennials and Gen Zers, but a lot of us, this world that pretends to be perfection that is not. And, my 70-30 rule is a tactic that I use with any new employee. And what I encourage a lot of organizations to do is that, 70% of your job should fire you up and fuel you up. 30% is just going to suck. Mm-hmm. And that is the harsh reality of life. Yeah. And if you're looking for the alternative, I don't think it really exists. And so take your job description, figure out what's in your 70%, fire you up, fill you up, and then what's in your 30%. And it's actually that's the first question I'll ask organizations I'll bring up a millennial board and the Gen Z board of their all-star employees and say, okay, 70-30, is that about the variable for each one? Is that the percentage for each one in terms of 70% of your job being great and 30% being kind of not that fun? And sometimes they're like, actually, it's 70-30 the other way. And it's like, all right, that's okay. Now I turn to the executives and say, now it's up to you all to create an environment to where some of those passions and things can thrive. Because our role as leaders has completely changed with these generations, from being the bossy boss to being much more of a mentor and a coach. Yeah. And I can talk a lot about why that is, but mostly if you look at even just our relationships with parents, Xers and boomers had these parents that were authoritarian figures. They didn't really have that deep of a connection or relationship. And that's completely shifted into with millennials and Gen Zers. And so when they enter the workforce, when they look at someone as their boss, they're looking for a similar type of relationship. And a lot of times they're looking for more of that connection and mentorship. And I know I digress in kind of more specifics on that.
No, and I think we're going to do a follow-up show, and I want to dig into some specifics on the motives for millennials specifically. But so here you are, and somehow I missed that you're still with 22 Squared. So you're still here. You still got this career business happening over here, but now you've created your personal brand known as the, Millennial Whisperer. So, but you've got a separate business, your own business over here in essence. And now you're coming out with another book. But when you look at your trajectory, again, coming back to motive, is that just kind of a multiple streams of income type thing? Where are you headed?
I mean, right now you got to look deeply at, all right, well, where's my ability to be free, if you will, right? To do the things that I love. Where does that come from? And a lot of it comes from where I'm a partner, 22 Squared. So my priorities oftentimes, Kevin, won't be, okay, what's the biggest stage I can get on? I put it through a different filter of who would be a good client for 22, and then I use that to then prioritize who it is that I pursue and who it is that I, also court. And so, ultimately, where is it that I'm going with it all? I think it's to continue to build upon that and have the impact that I'm looking for on some of these both larger organizations, but also smaller organizations, with applying just kind of these ideas around the importance of really motivating our people through connection.
With that, again, looking at motive for that, did you just see, hey, here's an opportunity to kind of expand and further this message? Did you see a specific problem popping up?
Yeah.
You said, I want to, like you said, this is what'd you say? A pain pill is needed
a painkiller.
here?
Yeah,
exactly. A painkiller? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. When all my stages and opportunities were they flew out the window. Yeah. And, part of the thing that I tell my daughters is the importance around resilience. So I have my 2-hour rule where I can wallow and complain about it. And then after 2 hours, it's time to take action. And it was in those 2 hours, it actually took me like literally 12 minutes. And I was like, okay, if coming out of this thing, where's the greatest amount of pain going to be? Well, people are going to need a return on their investment. They're going to be less excited about bringing in someone that can help with culture and connection with their people because they're struggling for survival, Kevin, right? Yeah. So what is the one thing that I can introduce in a new way, in a compelling way with stories and tactics, that can have the greatest impact and once again, be that new painkiller for organizations? And it's really with sales and networking. And people will say to me, like, Chris, you are the most ridiculous human being ever. Like, there's a saying, go to Chris Tuff for stuff at my firm because I know everyone for everything. And I did a lecture at Vanderbilt, a guest lecture, and it was actually one of the highest rating lectures of the year. And it was How to Network Like a Mofo was the title of it. And you had a line of young people that were like, Chris, like, tell me about this tactic and tell me about that tactic. I was like, all right, I'm going to write this book titled Save Your Asks, which is a call to action that we need to make our intention connection, and then the ask should come later. And that is a total flip of the script with anyone that's selling. I mean, you get it every single day, Kevin, of people wanting to be on your podcast, and they go in with that ask way too early. And it's like, whoa. Like
they lead with it.
They don't even listen to your podcast, right? Do you know how many people reach out to me? I have 700,000 unread emails, and 99% of them are people asking for something without doing any research.
I can't keep up with it anymore. But once in a blue moon, I'll get somebody, even an agency, like you. Yeah. Okay. So I just refigured this out that it was Interview Valet that first connected. I mean, my dad had talked about you, but Interview Valet, that's Tom Schwab, great guy. And but once in a while I'll get a contact, hey, I think so-and-so would be a good show because I listened to XYZ episode and I was really impacted by whatever. And the Hallelujah chorus comes on.
Totally.
Or I'll have somebody send, not just the book, but I've had, food and chocolates and, swag and stuff sent. And it's so rare. I grew up, my dad, I grew up in a sales culture, and man, you may nurture a relationship. I nurtured a relationship. This is a true story. I nurtured a relationship with Tom Ziegler for probably 2 years before I asked. And then I got on stage for Ziegler, but it was, and
it worked, right? So I have one of the concepts in the new book. You'll love this. I got to just give a little bit of a nod to it, but it's called Shawshanking. And Shawshanking was introduced to me in 2012 after I was signing one of the biggest deals of my life with social. Once again, it was the social media buying and technology. And I turned to this guy, Jason Beckerman, serial entrepreneur. And I said, Jason, we met 7 years ago. And here we are signing the biggest contract of probably your life. How, the sales guy in me, how did you do it? And he turned to me, he goes, Chris, I Shawshanked you. I was like, Shawshank, what's that? He said, Shawshank Redemption, he did a letter a week to get the library redone. And he finally, after 2 years, got it redone. Every single week, Chris, I've had a touch point with you for the last 7 years. It's been on Instagram. It's been on instant message. It's been on text. not ever was I asking for anything from you, but I was just creating a touch point. And it was through that we created a relationship to where we are now and signing this thing. I was like, oh my gosh, Jason, I just got a call from the CMO of a Fortune 50 company. And I think I kind of blew them off because they were trying to hire me as a social, digital person. So I'm going to call them back and I'm going to go try that same technique on them. And Kevin, here's the coolest thing. We ended up winning that client after I went over there and I whiteboarded who it was that they needed to hire. Once again, going with the give. And I gave them the give. And then I did a couple speeches around where social media and digital were going. And it was 18 months later that we got our first project with that company. And fast forward to today, we have 110 of our employees on that one account.
Wow.
And it's like, to your point, right? Like it takes time to curate connection. And all of my stories start the same way where they end up becoming my good friend, right? Like how cool is that? That when I'm courting someone, they end up becoming my good friend. And then a byproduct of that ends up doing business together.
Well, it sounds like the millennial, the newer how to win friends and influence people in today's day and economy,
and I was talking to your dad about that a couple of weeks ago. I was like, that's exactly what it is. And really it's no different than doubling down on my whole kind of obsession around connection. And it's taking connection inward within organizations and putting it outward. Right. So it's the connection. How do you create connection out?
Well, I want to come back. I've got a couple ideas. I want to come back and talk a little bit more about motives for millennials, what you see, college, and even that, because that has come up so consistently where the reality of our culture and our corporate world having such a hard time with this influx of new workers who don't have, the soft skills, which I got to figure out who it was because I read it and I loved it. Said, no, these are essential skills, but they don't know them. And this is what I talk to my adult kids about. You guys have such a leg up just because you know how to relate to people. I don't care what you know, whatever skill they can teach you, but the skill of relating to people. So I want to do a follow up on that.
I can't wait.
I'm so stoked to finally connected with you. The message is so stout. I love the threads that we could see through your life and how they played out. It'll speak to people because it helps us understand our own motives when we hear others. Man, thanks for coming on. Thanks for candidly sharing your motives. I'm
Absolutely.
grateful.
Thanks for the opportunity, Kevin.
Well, again, friends, that was Chris Tuff, Tuff, who you can find at themillennialwhisperer.com. If you appreciate the show, we'd love a rating or review on Spotify and Apple Podcast. You can subscribe with us on YouTube or any of the social media outlets and see the videos or video clips of all these shows. Find me at kevinmiller.co. And of course, if you want to learn how to master your own inner drive, get my book, What Drives You, on Amazon. Until next time, stay driven.
Yeah.